Welcome back to Good Morning La La Land. On Motivation Monday, there's something so special with the men and women that have served our country that give us motivation, knowing that we are one love right here. So Don Brown is in the house, best-selling author of many, many books, but this one in particular, The Last Fighter Pilot. You're going to have to tell us all about this.
We will. Thank you so much.
All right.
Yeah, thanks.
Welcome to the show.
Yeah.
Good to be here.
So where did the story start here?
This is a story. It's my 13th book. I've written 13 military books so far, a combination of fiction and nonfiction. This is written about Captain Jerry Yellen, who flew the very final combat mission of World War II. The mission was flown actually 5 days after the last atomic bomb was dropped. Most people think that the war ended when the bomb was dropped. That did not happen. And so Jerry was in Iwo Jima. We've seen that picture, the iconic photograph by Joe Rosenthal with the Marines pushing the flag up. One Navy guy, as a Navy guy, I've got to plug the Navy a little bit. But that was, we took Iwo Jima to put a fighter base there so that we could put P-51 Mustangs. And so we dropped both of the bombs. The Japanese did not initially surrender. 5 days passed, and we were hoping they would surrender. And then President Truman at the time ordered the air campaign against Japan to start, again, on the 14th. This was the day that the Emperor wound up surrendering or announcing the surrender. Captain Jerry Yellen and his young wingman, Jerry was 21 years old at the time, his wingman, 19-year-old Phil Schlomberg, who, by the way, happens to be the great uncle of the great actress Scarlett Johansson. They take off on this mission at 8 o'clock in the morning from Iwo Jima, and they fly basically 4 hours out to Tokyo. They start to execute a strafing mission against the Japanese airfield, and they pull up from the attack, and as they pull up, Jerry comes out of the clouds, and Phil Schlomberg disappears, and is the last known combat death of the war. 19 years old, grew up one of 10 kids, both of them were Jewish fighter pilots, finishing the war off, which is an interesting twist considering what happened in Germany. He was the last known combat death, and Scarlett's mom, Melanie Sloan, has written a beautiful foreword in the book, and so it's quite a story. So I'm just honored to bring Jerry's story here today. He passed away a year ago, and we're going to put him to rest in Arlington, at Arlington National Cemetery just next week. You know, there's so many.
So what do you think? What do you think he would say if he was standing up at his own eulogy? What do you think he would say? He
would say everybody love everybody and try to get along. You know, his story is a powerful twist, because a lot of those guys, just like in today's modern military, so many young men and women enter because of 9/11. Back in those days, it was Pearl Harbor. And so these guys entered, and young men and women entered the military hating the Japanese at the time. And so Jerry suffered from PTSD. The World War II guys don't really talk about it so much. But Jerry suffered. He lost 17 of his friends. Wow. And a few years later, he had one of his sons, now going to get this, he wanted to go to Japan on one of these exchange educational programs. So Jerry's son goes to Japan, meets a Japanese girl, and you can see where this is going. So he falls in love with a Japanese girl, comes home and said, "Dad, I want to marry this girl." And so Jerry, Captain Yellen, says, "Well, what's your father do?" Well, he was a kamikaze pilot. So you have an American fighter pilot whose future in-law is a kamikaze pilot, and they had to learn to reconcile.
The universe is like, you got to
They had to learn to reconcile. It's a powerful story. And Jerry spent so much of his life after that working with young men and women with PTSD. He was working with an organization called Heaven and Earth Oasis. They do a lot of non-traditional therapy.
Let's talk about that, because we know that we lose a lot of vets to suicide, and we talk a lot on here about how we can really live the best life. And whether you've been a war vet or not, a lot of people do have PTSD regardless. And so we know there's so many different programs and different modalities, and people are trying to do it, but there's just not enough people to even serve people with PTSD. So how's that working with us?
Well, the first thing we've got to do, we have to recognize that PTSD is not only real, but it's deadly and debilitating. And so personal human touch, I think, is where it starts. You know, that's where it starts. Personal human touch is where it starts. Personal human touch. Anyway, I'm working actually with a couple of guys out at Leavenworth. You know, we have a U.S. disciplinary barracks out there now, and you wouldn't believe what these paratroopers and soldiers have had to go through with in Afghanistan, because we lost more people in Afghanistan from bombs in the ground, or we call them IEDs, than from getting shot. And everywhere these guys are stepping, they have to actually move across the country country in single file, setting forth their pathway with baby powder. Because, and then out the front of these columns, there's a guy called a mine hound, and that person has a metal detector sweeping for mines. And if you step to the left or step to the right, boom. And so they're living with this. They're living with all this. Jerry was living with a lot of that. So I really appreciate the work you guys are doing to bring attention to
I had a dear friend that I used to dance with, because I used to dance also, and he was actually a war vet, and he was one of those people that went out and would test the bombs. And I thought, wow, like, can you imagine going to test to see if a bomb is active or not active, and just the willingness. And I know that there's different mixed feelings for people out there about, should we be at war, should we not? And I don't have those answers. And I know that we have to put rules and regulations and boundaries in this universe. But I just want to really acknowledge all the men and women that have served. And I know that I can't imagine what people have been through, and we just want to send love and deep gratitude for everyone, knowing that everyone does things because they generally feel like they're doing the best.
Absolutely.
Right?
Exactly.
And we have to highlight and appreciate you, Dawn, for highlighting these folks' stories as well.
Right.
Where did your story begin?
My story began in a little town called Plymouth, North Carolina, 3,000 miles from here. And somehow I wound up here on the set of Good Morning La La Land. I don't know how, but a lot of times, you know, I was with Jerry Yellen when this book was released, and it was released. We kicked off at the Reagan Library up in Simi Valley. So I'm standing there speaking. I'm here at the Reagan Library. All these people are out here, and I can understand why they would want Jerry there. I'm going to say, what am I doing here? You know, it's just, what am I doing here at the Reagan Library? But it's been a journey of service, and but I just love people, and I have compassion, especially for fellow vets, I think, who probably are suffering more than any particular demographic group from PTSD at this point. But like you said, Dr. Erin, it's not just war. Any sort of trauma can cause it. I've been a divorce lawyer, and so you know, it can
that could be worse. That's
right.
So tell people where they can find your book, how they can get involved with the organization.
All right. Okay. The book you can find on Amazon. The book is Last Fighter Pilot: The Final Story of the Final Combat Mission of World War II, published by Regnery. I'd encourage you to check out also heavenandearthoasis.org. They're the organization that's working so well with PTSD, and if you need some information, you can contact their publicist, Tracy at lightfinderpr.com. And if I didn't get that right, I'll hear about it. But I
love Tracy.
Yes, she's wonderful. But thank you so much for taking part in the battle. We appreciate it.
What a pleasure.
God bless you
Stay
both.
tuned. We'll be right back.
Bless you both.